Hello everyone, my name's Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT11, and BT11 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new updated version of Aegisdramon. So Aegisdramon's base core and playstyle came out in EX3, where it's trying to utilize its ability to split our own Digimon apart from their inheritables as new Digimon to be able to gain their powerful on-play effects to either gain us some advantage or try to disrupt the opponent in some way, shape, or form. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile and see what changed. So, starting off with the Digitama, I'm still going to be running 4 copies of Bukamon. This is the only Digitama that's actually interacting with the mechanic on trying to separate our Digimon, making it one of the more ideal ones. If you just wanted to run a generic draw Digitama, by all means do so, but I do like the availability of the tempo that this card can provide when we're being able to utilize our effects to split our Digimon apart. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of ModokiBetamon. So ModokiBetamon is kind of a tech or flex spot for the deck, and it could really be whatever rookie you feel like you want to be, but I do recommend utilizing some sort of floodgate just because we could pop them out on the opponent's turn, and then utilize that floodgate to try to disrupt the opponent. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gomamon. So this is the BT7 version of Gomamon, and the deck doesn't really have any dedicated searchers or diggers, but it has Gomamon acting as one of its better pieces to help with the overall card draw of the deck, where when we split them apart, we get to draw 2 cards, which is pretty decent considering we have lots of ways to be able to split apart our Digimon to try to continuously find what we need to see. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Penguinmon. So this brand new BT11 version of Penguinmon is another really high synergistic card for the deck, just because it's interacting with the idea on we want to split it apart, and then when we split this card apart, it's going to add it to his own inheritable sources, and then when we do that, we get to draw a card, so that way we could have a secondary stack going with some decent inheritable sources to be able to then build up another Digimon and split it apart and continue the combo train that way. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Crabmon. So the EX3 version of Crabmon is still really good for being able to give our Digimon jamming, on top of the fact that he's also going to add to our Digimon's inheritable sources, so that way we have multiple different Digimon to have multiple different sources to be able to start building upon and splitting from. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tobiumon. So Tobiumon is in the deck being a really cheap and efficient card to not only hard play, but Digivolve into as well. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Coelamon. So Coelamon is another card that has some decent synergy as a possible card we could split apart, so that way we could spawn an instant blocker, on top of the fact that it is still another card like a Tobiumon that's pretty tempo efficient for us to use when we're Digivolving up our chain. But the main level 4 that we want to utilize is going to be 4 copies of Ebidramon. So the EX3 version of Ebidramon is pretty good just because when we split him apart, he's going to be able to give one of our Digimon blocker, so we have ways to be able to have some good defensive lines of play in the deck, on top of the fact that when he's played from an inheritable source, we get to unsuspend that Digimon, so we could be either super aggressive with the card and swing again, or we could be defensive with the card, and because he's granting that Digimon blocker, now it has the ability to possibly block an incoming attack. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MegaSeadramon. So MegaSeadramon is a pretty decent card to try to be aggressive with, just because he could help us split apart our Digimon's Digivolution sources, so that way we could try to form a wide field relatively quickly, on top of the fact that his inheritable ability is very similar to his static ability to help us be able to split apart our Digimon to try to make the most of our Digimon's on-play abilities and try to create a wide field relatively quickly. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new WaruSeadramon. So WaruSeadramon is another card like MegaSeadramon that's trying to help us split apart our Digimon's inheritable sources, so that way we could try to form a wide field relatively quickly. The upside to using him is he does this when he digivolves, so we don't need to attack in order to be able to split apart, and he even has that ability on play in case we split apart him, so that way we could try to split apart our stack even further to be able to create that wider field. And then he even has a nice inheritable ability that also has some good disruptive capabilities, where when a Digimon's played by a card effect, then we get to gain 1 memory, which means that when we're utilizing our own card effects to be able to split our sources, that's going to allow us to trigger this effect, or when the opponent is trying to play some of their cards by their effects, this is going to try to anti-tempo them a little bit, making for a really good new addition into the deck. Next, on to the level 6s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of the BT2 MetalSeadramon. So this is a pretty interesting card just because of how this card is working with the deck, just because he's a level 6 with an on-play ability that we could take advantage of. We also like this card because he does have Seadramon in his name, which the deck does kind of care about, is the usage of some Seadramons, and his on-play ability, again, is still pretty decent and disruptive, allowing us to be able to bounce multiple low-level Digimon back to the opponent's hand, and we can even be kind of aggressive with this card just because this Digimon can't be blocked as long as the opponent's Digimon doesn't have any Digivolution sources, making it a really unique card for the deck to utilize. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Plesiomon. So this is the Digimon we're going to want to try to Digivolve into more often than not, just because, again, when Digivolving into this card, it allows us to try to be able to set up an extra body on our field, on top of the fact that he's going to help replace the body that we gained in terms of the inheritable abilities that we have access to. Then, on top of that, his inheritable ability allows us to bounce at one of the opponent's Digimon when we play a Digimon by our card effects, so when we're doing our source splitting shenanigans, it's adding some extra control into the deck. And then the last Digimon and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Aegisdramon. So Aegisdramon is a pretty decent level 7 for us to utilize, just because when we Digivolve up into him, he's going to be doing the source splitting shenanigans that we want to do to be able to create that wide field, and the Seadramon name actually does matter with this card, allowing us to be able to split apart either a low-level Digimon or a Digimon with Seadramon in its name, or one of the allotted types that it's going to be interacting with. And then on top of that, he has a nice ability that triggers during the opponent's turn, which is where a lot of our disruptive capabilities are coming into play, where when an opponent plays a Digimon card, so if they're utilizing a card by card effect to be able to play another Digimon, or they're just hard slamming one from their hand, it doesn't necessarily matter, then we get to activate this Digimon's when Digivolving ability to be able to split apart our sources even on the opponent's turn, which could offer us some good defensive lines of play. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Davis. So Davis is still just the best blue generic memory fixing tamer. If you really wanted to on a budget, you could run any blue memory fixing tamer you feel like would best synergize with the deck, but Davis is still the best just because it's helping with the overall consistency of the deck, just because the deck doesn't have a whole lot of searchers, and we do want that search potential. Even though we're not running any green Digimon, we're still at least able to grab a blue Digimon off the top 3. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall. So Ice Wall is still just one of Blue's best defensive options to try to shut the opponent out from wanting to be able to attack, while being a nice security threat to also continue to try to anti-tempo the opponent by allowing us to gain 2 memory. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Sourai. So Sourai is just a defensive tech or flex spot, and it could really be any kind of defensive utility card that you feel like would best fit inside of the deck. And if you really wanted to, just as an example, you could just run any generic bounce effect in its place. just to try to deal with some problematic Digimon that you might not be able to deal with otherwise. I do like what Sourai is offering for this style of deck just because we want to try to interact with our MetalSeadramon a little bit, on top of the uniqueness of its defensive capabilities, shutting down potentially the opponent's ability to be able to attack with their Digimon, as long as that Digimon doesn't have any Digivolution sources. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost. So Blue Memory Boost is the deck's dedicated searching or digging tool next to Davis. This is a little bit more efficient to use just because it's a lower cost, and because it's not a tamer, it doesn't have the capability of being sniped by anything that has the potential to be able to delete tamers. So the search capabilities off of this card is looking at the top 4 for any blue Digimon, on top of the fact that it'll go into the battle area with its secondary main ability of delay to be able to gain 2 memory later for a more powerful follow-up turn. And then as far as the overall game plan and gameplay of the deck goes, it does require a decent amount of setup in order to be able to make your high-level plays with your larger body Digimon as effective and efficient as we possibly can. So when it comes to stack building, this is where this deck actually has some decent creative freedom to be able to build kind of whatever stack it feels like, because we're just going to be separating it and trying to rebuild it anyway. So when it comes to whatever level 3 you're going to be starting with, it technically doesn't matter because we're just going to be splitting it apart most likely anyway. So for this example, I'm just going to be utilizing Gomamon just because he's a really easy generic one for us to use. That's going to help us with drawing some extra cards when we use them. But like I said, all of them have their own decent benefits to wanting to split them apart. Then from here, again, with our level 4s, it doesn't really matter. If you want to go for tempo, then we do have Coelamon and we do have Tobiumon to act as really good tempo tools, or if you want to try to line up a more powerful power play, then we do have Ebidramon as the primary one, just because he does have an on-play ability versus the other 2 that are just in here for the tempo. Then I think that's the new WaruSeadramon is going to be the desired Digimon that we want to utilize going up our chain, so that way we could try to make his abilities to be able to gain some extra memory or split our Digimon as effective as we possibly can. So from this type of a position, assuming we have a Davis on our field and we're starting at 3 memory, we're going to move it out, then we're going to play our WaruSeadramon, then WaruSeadramon is going to be able to split apart a Digimon like our Gomamon to be able to draw us 2 cards, and then with the Bukamon, then we're going to be only basically paying 2 because it's going to be gaining us a memory back when we split our Gomamon. Then from this type of a position, we could Digivolve into either our MetalSeadramon or our Plesiomon. I think MetalSeadramon is better to use with our Plesiomon, so that way when we Digivolve into our Plesiomon, we could try to add MetalSeadramon into its inheritable sources after splitting apart something like our Ebidramon to be able to have some decent power plays. Then from this type of a position, this is why having the memory boost is also pretty important, so that way we could pop it to be able to go up to 3, Digivolving into our Plesiomon to go to 0 and not pass the turn, to be able to then play our Ebidramon, and now we have 2 extra bodies on our field going up into our high-level Digimon. Then we're going to use WaruSeadramon's ability to also be able to gain a memory back, so that way when we Digivolve for 4 into our Aegisdramon, we're setting our opponent at 3, which is a pretty decent number to set them at in case they have a memory fixing tamer of their own. And then from here, our Aegisdramon is going to be able to split apart another Digimon, which the best one in this type of a stack is going to be either our WaruSeadramon or our MetalSeadramon, and I'm just going to be utilizing MetalSeadramon just because we could then use the MetalSeadramon to be able to go into another Aegisdramon to be able to split apart the MetalSeadramon again, and that's kind of the whole little core and loop of how the deck wants to play in combination with MetalSeadramon at least. But this is what makes Plesiomon just a really good inheritable Digimon to have, is because it helps us be able to line up whatever Digimon we need to split to be able to do as effective as plays as we possibly can, on top of the fact that we also could have some extra disruption into the deck, all depending on how the stack is built and the different types of cards you're playing with and how the opponent is playing their cards as well. But the intricacy of how you're going to be evaluating your stack, what cards you're going to be adding under, what cards you could split apart, that's all going to be one of the core ideas on how to optimize that and make it as efficient as you possibly can to be able to gain the most out of a deck like this. And then there's still just a whole bunch of various tech and tools that you could think about incorporating into the deck, all depending on what you actually want to gain out of the deck. So blue has some really good level 3 Digimon that we could think about running, especially ones with on-play abilities, but I'm just going to be highlighting Syakomon as another anti-meta floodgate, just to try to stop the opponent from being able to reduce the cost of their Digivolutions, which actually could matter in certain matchups. Then, as far as some other pretty decent Digimon we could utilize, we could think about utilizing Chimeramon, just because he's really good in any deck that has the capabilities of going wide and being able to spawn level 4 Digimon at will, so that way we could fuse the level 4 Digimon to be able to create Chimeramon as a body for some extra control and extra aggression, just because with the DNA, we could attack with the card right away, while still being able to Digivolve into a level 6 Digimon with him afterward. Then we do have some other really good level 6 Digimons that we could run in the deck, all depending on how you want to best support Aegisdramon. So we could run the BT10 Regulicusmon as another way to be able to attack the opponent's inheritable sources, on top of the fact that he's just playing into the sub-theme, by allowing us to be able to have extra capabilities at being able to split apart our Digivolution sources when we attack, and this is not limited to once per turn. Then we also have the old Regulicusmon as another really decent card to try to attack the opponent's inheritable sources and be able to generate some extra resources for doing so. Then we even have the King Waymon package, which means you could also think about running Waymon as more ways to be able to split apart our inheritable sources while sticking with the subtypes that the deck wants to play with. And for that same similar style of reasoning, we also could think about running the Piranha package with Piranhamon and Metal Piranhamon, so that way when Metal Piranhamon attacks, we split apart our Piranhamon, and then Piranhamon's going to have Rush to be able to attack right away, similarly to how the deck would want to utilize Chimeramon. And then we even have some Dramon synergies that we could think about leaning into, utilizing Slayerdramon for his goading type of ability, just because we could force the opponent to do certain actions that they might not want to do otherwise. Then, as I stated before, we do have some pretty decent other utility options that we could run. So we do have Maelstrom as a really good new option that's kind of acting similarly to Kaisernail to try to help us split apart our Digimon, and then for having Seadramons, then we get to have some extra bounce capabilities on top of it, but if you just are looking for a card to bounce, then we have a slew of different bounce options that you could run. And then we do have the other cards that help split apart our Digimon's inheritable sources, like Kaisernail and Tidal Wave, just to be able to try to flood the field better. And then we do just have a whole slew of different blue tamers that we could think about utilizing. We could think about utilizing some other duo tamers. We could think about utilizing some other memory fixing tamers, but I'm just going to be highlighting Sora and Joe just because it's one of the better generic blue tamers for us to be playing around with, not only allowing us to potentially gain some decent memory, but also attacking and trying to disrupt the opponent's Digimons with their Digivolution sources, making it so it's easier for something like Sourai to be even more effective against the opponent, and possibly triggering some of our various other abilities as well. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.